Welcome in. Welcome in. Sunday morning means it's time for the Blitz, brought to you by Triple Play Fantasy. And we get to your questions and get everything rolling right after this.
You're on mute. You're on mute. Welcome in. Welcome in. Jeffrey Allen Mesha is on mute here. There you go, buddy.
We got it. So as always, time to get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. It wouldn't be a hosted show by me if there wasn't some sort of technical screw up that we're not exactly the most proficient guys, which is why we miss Mikey D terribly. So on the Blitz, we take your questions live to start sit advice for the upcoming games, Week 12, which, Joe, we discussed this last night. Certainly an interesting lineup of games, a lot of division rivalries, a lot of juicy lineups, a lot of questions that we went over last night that I'm sure we'll get into a little bit this morning. But, I mean, especially like Houston, Jacksonville, Cleveland, I'm forgetting who they're Cleveland, Denver. I mean, that's not a division matchup, but it's just lineup-wise, it's going to get interesting, and there's certainly some good games coming up. So, any thoughts on those, or what's going on for today?
Last week, we were starting C.J. Stroud and Kyler Murray because that main slate didn't have a lot of the main QBs. They were all playing the night games, and this week's the exact opposite. So, like from a DFS perspective, you have in that main slate, you had the Josh Allen and Mahomes and Stroud and Jalen Hurts all available. So from DFS, very tricky this week. And, I'm looking at some of these start-sit scenarios we have coming in. And it's funny because you strive to be as deep as you can for the bye weeks and the injury weeks. You draft your team for 4 weeks. You're super deep because nobody's hurt and everybody's playing. Then all of a sudden, you're strapped every week looking for these running backs and wideouts. If it's a super flex, the second QB, whatever it is. Now we're at week 12. I believe bye weeks, if they're not completely over, they're close. Injuries aren't too heavy right now. And now you're looking at a lot of teams with a lot of depth here, and it comes down to making the right decision, which sometimes can be harder than not having the depth. Having it and having to make that decision when it's a coin toss every week, luckily that is what we are here for.
It seems to be a better lineup from a spread standpoint. The Thanksgiving Day games, although we did have an upset in Detroit, those spreads were pretty decent size on all those games, including the Black Friday game with Miami and New York. It just seems like the Sunday games outside of Kansas City and the Raiders, everything's fairly close. So it should be interesting and should be good to get into some questions and some hypotheticals. So.
And even that game, real quick, Mesh, would you take Kansas City minus 10 points against anybody right now? I love them, and I think they're going to go far, but they're not scoring a lot of points. No,
the only reason I would say maybe today is because they lost last week. I can't. Now that is a lot of points, and it's tough, but it is the Raiders. They're at Vegas. It's not exactly a tough atmosphere. It's not like it's the black hole when it was in Oakland. So the only reason I would say that I could swallow that spread is the fact that they lost last week to Philly, and they'll look to kind of get a little bit out of their system. That's where I would go with that.
Yeah, Andy Reid is historically phenomenal coming off of a loss. But it's just, they're scoring in the 20s every week now. It's interesting. And their defense is really good. It's the best Chiefs defense that Mahomes has been on that team for.
It is. And I couldn't even name the quarterback for Raiders, Aiden O'Connell. But Aiden O'Connell, the Chiefs defense is much, much better than years past. I could maybe even see the Chiefs defense getting a touchdown perhaps off of an interception or a fumble. That's how how good their defense has been this year. Certainly top tier. So right off the bat, we got our boy Mikey D checking in. He's got a question for us. He got Rashee Rice, Deontay Johnson, or Gabe Davis, PPR. Joe, thoughts?
I mean, Rice feels the safest, right, to get you 10 points, just the way that he's been going. He seems like he's having a lot of like those 4 for 50 and touchdown weeks. My thing, Gabe Davis, I just feel like if any week, it would be this week because they're going to have to throw, I think, playing Philadelphia. Their defensive injuries, I don't think they're going to be able to stop Philly a ton. So Gabe Davis might catch lightning in a bottle with him, as you do sometimes. I believe Deontay Johnson to be really interesting this week. The guy was hurt for a while. He comes back, has a couple of great weeks right off the bat. Obviously, Pickett's favorite target. Then they suck again. He stinks for 2 straight weeks. The last 2 weeks, they fire the offensive coordinator. I always feel like when you have that midweek change, there's going to be some momentum coming in for Pittsburgh today. So I really, my gut, my heart wants to go with Deontay Johnson here, but you got to figure Rice is probably the safest and the best shot to get you a touchdown. I'm not against Gabe Davis either. And like Gabe Davis, I feel like could be a good DFS play this week because they're going to have to throw a lot. So he might have one of those games, but I've just seen too many 2 for 25 Gabe Davis weeks where it makes me a little squeamish.
I see your point there. What I will say is the Philadelphia run defense is much more stout than their pass defense. So I could see Gabe Davis, being with Diggs getting a lot of attention. You got Gabe Davis, you got Khalil Shakir, who I think they're going to put up some points this week. Kenny Pickett and that Pittsburgh offense, I can't necessarily trust. And we said it last week or the week before, I forget it. I like Rice. Our boy Trans-Siberian had a question about Rashee Rice, and don't get me wrong, I think that the guy is turning into the guy in Kansas City, but to me, he's still not. So to me, I think Gabe Davis is the way to roll. And I know that Mikey would usually be here to split the tie or to kind of break that. So, but take that for what it is, Mike. We appreciate you reaching out. So, having said that, we got our boy Trans-Siberian checking in. Always good to see Captain Dr. Pepper. Good start to my week. I started 49ers defense. Well, did I click that off there? As always, this is going to be a tough one without Mikey here producing. So I need to, let's see here. Need to sit one standard. Downs, Ford, Rashee Rice.
So right off the bat, Mish, I got to chime in. I will take the shout out to Gio's every Friday night in Drop the Leash's household. We get a extra large from Gio's, half cheese, half sausage and cheese, and an order of fries every Friday night like clockwork. So I love the shout out there, Trans-Siberian. Thank you very much.
Dude, I don't even know what Gio's is.
It's just a local pizza shop in East Granby. I don't know how the fuck he knows what Gio's is. That's the real question.
I mean, it's apparently big in East Granby, Connecticut, and the Ukraine.
All 5,000 of us here in East Granby.
Yeah. So let's see here. So started 49ers deep. So he did well there. Need to sit one. What are you thinking when you look at this between Downs, Ford, and Rashee Rice?
I mean, I'm going to definitely start Ford. So it comes down to Downs or Rice, and I'll analyze it the same way. Rice might be a little safer. Downs a little banged up, but he's going to play full strength today. I'm most intrigued by Downs out of these three because Downs has shown to get a lot of targets from Minshew. They've been in a lot of high-scoring games lately. I'm most intrigued by Downs. But again, like if it's standard and it's a standard league, I think you have to go Rice for your best shot to get a touchdown.
Yeah, and again, we talk about the running back a lot. So Ford is going to be in, no doubt. Between Downs and Rice, that's a tough one. I'm going to have to lean Rice just because of what we just said about him kind of being or turning into the guy there in Kansas City. Downs, you got. I mean, I get it. They're coming off of a bye. They're home versus Tampa Bay. I think Jonathan Taylor's going to have a big week. I still think Michael Pittman's going to get some attention. So where does that leave Downs in the pecking order? So I would say Rashee Rice, just for, you're right, standard league has the best shot just because he is seemingly, the guy over there. So
I do like what Downs is doing in Indy, though, and I really don't consider him a bad play either.
No, certainly not. So, and he also chimes in, no monster drink. Well, hey man, and this is blasphemy for me. I worked for Red Bull for 8 years. They would be up in arms if they would see me drinking monsters the last few weeks. I'm an equal opportunity energy drink guy, so certainly. And then we also got Triple Play Fantasy checking in here. Coffee and Bailey's. I mean, I can't disagree with that one, my friend. So on Twitter, we had a couple hypotheticals come in, Joe. I had one come across earlier in a DM. Somebody was asking in a half PPR, Calvin Ridley or Chris Olave, which is that's a difficult choice for me on that one. I would have to say, if I'm going with that right off the bat, I'm leaning Olave just because Calvin Ridley just has been beyond inconsistent. He's had a couple of great games, and I get it. He's coming off a pretty good game, but we always talk about I hate getting caught in that pitfall of what did the guy do last week and then basing that on what you're doing with him this week. So I'm leaning Olave. I get it, Carr's back. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a tough one because you don't want to overcompensate for last week. At the same time, Ridley's the number one there, and he looked like a number one last week, which I think is encouraging for Jacksonville. They're playing the Texans this week, which you now believe to be, all of a sudden this is considered like a shootout game because of the way that Texans offense is playing. So I definitely get the allure with Ridley. Olave's in an interesting spot this week because now Michael Thomas has landed on the IR. So Olave, he's been the number one anyway, but he's going to have Shashid lining up on the opposite side instead of Michael Thomas. What I wonder about that, though, is again, we've talked about owning Carr and even Kamara. If you got no Michael Thomas, it leads me to believe that they're going to get even more funky in the red zone. It's going to be even more Taysom Hill, even more Kamara direct snaps, all this weird shit they do, which works for them. It's working pretty well for them. But it's not great fantasy-wise for these main guys. So I don't love Olave to score a touchdown, but from a sheer volume perspective and consistency perspective, to your point, Olave is exactly the opposite of Ridley. Olave actually is pretty consistent as long as he's playing. You can pretty much slate him in. I mean, it's pretty crazy. His last 5 games, 6, 6, 5, 7, and 7 for receptions, anywhere between 8 and 15 targets, anywhere between 46 and 96 yards, TDs 2 out of the 5 games. So, you're almost pretty much saying you're going to get 6 for 75 out of Olave, and you can flip a coin on whether or not he's going to get in the end zone. Ridley, man, it's hard because Ridley could have another home run day. But again, I got to say Olave is a little bit of the safer play there. I think today I'd take the shot with Ridley and try to catch lightning in a bottle again. But I do really believe Olave to be the safer play. If you just want to know you're going to get 15, Olave is the way to go.
So, gosh, as you're talking, I'm actually almost changing my mind based on the matchup. And, just looking at that, New Orleans at Atlanta, that's such a weird matchup. And Atlanta's such a bizarre team from a defense and offense standpoint. You got Jacksonville at Houston. CJ Stroud has been putting up astronomical numbers. Trevor Lawrence is going to have to keep up with throwing the ball. So, gosh, as we're talking, I'm thinking maybe Ridley's the way to go just based on matchup.
Yeah, and the other thing too is Jacksonville was using Etienne so well the first half of this season, and he was the bell cow. Now all of a sudden they've abandoned the run game a little bit the last few weeks. So you feel like, if Houston goes up 14-3 early, it's starting to feel like Jacksonville just going to bomb the ball for the rest of the day, which, again, if it's trash points for Ridley in the fourth quarter, I'm fine. I don't care when they come. Yeah, I think we're between you and myself. I'm talking myself into Ridley. I do feel like Olave is safe, right? Like there's a 90% chance Olave lands you double-digit points, and Ridley's percentage for that isn't as high. But I think that there's a much higher percentage for Ridley to pop off and go for 100 in a TD or two, where Olave feels like he stays more in that 60 to 70 range, and you don't know with him in the touchdowns, especially with the way the Saints are.
Right on. Well, so hopefully that helps as far as that one. And another one that came through, and this is via DM, and this is an interesting one I thought was Royce Freeman or Devin Singletary. I'll let you start with that and see what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So this was a product of being in buys and injuries still. So that's for sure. You got Freeman there, splitting the time with Darrell Henderson. From the little bit I saw last week, it does feel like Henderson gets more of the pivotal carries and a little bit more red zone and reception opportunity than Freeman. Who was the other guy?
Devin Singletary.
Yeah, Singletary. So it sounds like Pierce is back. Singletary was Mike made a good point last night. Singletary was so good, even with Pierce back, who wasn't very good before he got hurt. You got to believe they're at least going to give Singletary a split there. I'm going to stick with Singletary in that Houston offense. I think that offense as a whole will just score a lot more points too than St. Louis or the Rams and Freeman.
So St. Louis last night.
I know.
That bad habit. So I'll actually. I'm going to say Singletary too, even though Dameon Pierce is back. Yeah. I think Singletary's got to prove himself there as being an important part of the offense. So I'll lean Singletary, maybe by a little bit more than a slight margin. So we've got April checking in. Demario Douglas or Drake London PPR. What do you got, Joe?
Yeah, these guys are very similar in my opinion right now because they're both clearly the number one passing option in not very good passing games for both of these teams. The difference is Atlanta's figured out how to run the ball, and they're having a better year than expected. And we all know how the Patriots season is gone. I think at this point, offensively, Demario Douglas is probably the only thing you could call a bright spot in their offense this year. I think this one's really a toss-up. Man, I'm going to lean... I think I'm going to lean London here by a real little bit. London just shown a little bit better chance to get in the end zone. Demario Douglas has been good, though. And, I mean, obviously they can score in the Giants. This is really – I feel pretty good about either of these guys today, to be honest. I think just because as bad as the Atlanta passing game has been, the Patriot one's been even worse. So I think I'm going to go London. But I like them both in a PPR.
You're right. These offenses have been all-time bad. But as a Patriots fan, and I'm not just saying this coming from a biased standpoint, but I'm leaning Demario Douglas. And I brought it up last night. If you're looking for a cheap DFS play, I think he's probably a good guy to roll with, so you can fit in some other players like an A.J. Brown or guys like that into your lineup. Because over the last 4 games, he's got 29 targets. Now, I get it. We joke around. He's got, I don't even know, Tony Eason, Drew Black. I don't know who's throwing to him these days. Bailey Zappi. They cut Will, or they waived Will Greer. So I don't even know what's going on in New England. They don't even know what's going on. But what I do know is they're going to put up a little bit of offense here and there. And Demario Douglas seems to be the guy getting the targets. So I don't necessarily like either option, but if I'm going one over the other, I'm going Douglas. Hopefully that helps you out with a little bit of a split there.
It's close because London only went 3 for 36 last week. Douglas has got at least 4 catches in 4 straight games. Douglas does not have a touchdown though. He did go 6 for 84 last week against. I think what concerns me is I'm looking at London. They played Arizona last week and he didn't do anything. How's he going to do against the Saints? That Patriot passing game and that offense in general, I don't have any confidence in Douglas scoring a touchdown. But I do, he could go for more catches and more. It's just that Patriot offense. God, that game's going to be dreadful.
From simply because it's PPR, I would say, and because of what you just said, I'm leaning Douglas. Hopefully that helps there, April. So We got Nathan checking in, says, good morning. We got Herbert or Justin Fields. Let me go ahead. I'll kick this one off for the two of us. I don't think you can get away from Justin Fields. There was a question with him and somebody else last week, and I'm forgetting it. I went with somebody else, and shame on me, because Fields is a guy who seemingly is going to get you 80 to 100 yards rushing no matter what each week. So whether he puts up 100 yards passing or, I mean, it's the 300 games are rare, but let's just say that happens. That's a home run. So based on the rushing ability of Fields, I don't think you can get away from him. What are your thoughts?
This one's a tough one too. I mean, it's not a great matchup for Herbert. Obviously, they're home against the Ravens. Fields. Who are they playing this week? Why am I having a
Minnesota Monday night game,
right? On Monday night. Yeah. In Minnesota, so you don't have any weather issues there. What did Fields do last week? They were home. They were at Detroit last week. Fields went for 169 and a touchdown, but to your point, 104 rushing yards. Man, I don't know. I guess you go Fields here too. It's really close though. And I'll say it again. I don't want to sound like a broken record. Like, we've got a lot of scenarios where the safer play, there's a safe play and there's a home run play. And I feel like it's the same thing again here. Like, Herbert's probably not going to get you less than 15, but I don't think he's going to torch Baltimore either. I mean, Fields has shown the ability to really suck, but then obviously if he throws a couple of touchdowns and you couple that with 100 rushing yards or close to it and a rushing touchdown, he can quickly go for 32. So this is another, you want the safe play or you want the high reward potential. But I mean, I said it to my dad last week. He was going about Fields or Purdy in his league, and I'm like, you can't sit Fields. And he ran for 100 rushing yards. He wasn't great in the passing game, but I guess with the matchup, I'll say you can't sit Fields here. I would say this though. When Herbert has a better matchup, I don't think it's a no-brainer to play Fields every week here. Do you?
You said you think that Herbert is a safer play. I disagree. I think Fields is a safer play because he's going to get you, let's just say, 10 points without even throwing the ball. Yeah. So to me, that's right. A floor and that's a safe play. Whereas Herbert maybe, especially against the Baltimore defense. So I hopefully that helps, Nathan.
Yeah, I'll go Fields here today too. It's hard sitting Herbert though, even against a tough team. That's a hard guy to sit.
Yeah, no doubt. So he's also checking in and asking, please pick two to start, and it's a standard between Eckler, Mixon, Hunt, and James Cook. If I bench Herbert, do I also not play Eckler? Interesting question on that one. I'll let you, you know what? Start with that last question, Joe.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually, I think you don't play Herbert and you feel even, I mean, you're going to play Eckler no matter what. You cannot sit Austin Eckler, especially in that group. But I think at least you can say, okay, I'm going to sit Herbert, but in case the Chargers do go off, I'm going to play Eckler and hope that, whether it's a rushing or a receiving touchdown, we know Eckler can do it both ways. As far as I think it's very clear you got to play Eckler and Mixon here. Mixon's got no quarterback. They're playing Pittsburgh. That's going to be a physical, drawn out time of possession, a lot of running, I believe, in that game. So I think you got to play Mixon, and Eckler, is one of 10 to 20 players that I don't think you can ever sit Eckler. Can you?
I'll agree with you on Eckler. I don't think it's as cut and dry with Joe Mixon. As I know you were high on him last night, especially from a standpoint. This week I am. I'm not so much. Mixon, again, from a FanDuel standpoint, I said it last night, he hasn't gotten more than 18.5 points in any week. So it's a tough Pittsburgh defense. Out of these four, you throw out Hunt already. I think we'll agree on that, just because Jerome Ford seems to be a guy, even though Hunt is getting in the end zone more so than Ford, he's not getting the yardage, so you can toss him out already. I'm looking at James Cook and Joe Mixon. I'll agree with you slightly on Mixon, but I hesitate. The only reason I might not necessarily start Cook is because they got Philadelphia, who has, like I said earlier, a better rush defense than do a pass defense. So, but I'll agree with Eckler and
Cook can't score. Like, even if you don't like Mixon for 20 rushes and 130 yards, he's got a good shot to get in the end zone without Burrow. Cook can't score. They don't play him on. They don't give him the ball at the goal line.
True. So Mikey's checking in, sending love from between Kansas City and Lincoln. Can't wait to be back next week. For those who don't know, and I'm guessing Joe doesn't, I'm pretty sure Lincoln is the capital of Nebraska. So I'm pretty sure. So Mike, you can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just off the top of my head with my
North Platte.
That's my 6th grade geography chiming in on there. So I'll see here. Trans-Siberian checking in. We'll see here.
Talking me out of Charbonnet.
Forgot to thank you, Jeff, for talking me out of. Whoops, and I just took it off the screen. For talking me out of Charbonnet. He says, "Miss you, Mike." We all miss Mikey. He would have said Downs and Rice because of
Tampa Bay's been torched defense on. They have. Gotcha. I don't have an issue there with Downs. I don't. I just Rice is scoring a little more than him, but that's a good one. This is like 3 weeks in a row, man, where we've gotten so many coin flips on some of these questions. They got me sweating.
So, and he sent me this via DM. This is Thanksgiving morning where he was asking me either Ford or Charbonnet. My initial thought was to say Charbonnet just because he's the guy, and Ford, you got him and Hunt kind of splitting things, and Hunt gets in the end zone. But as I was making my case for that, I realized they're playing San Francisco, and that's just San Francisco, man. They're on a tear defensively, especially. It's just seemingly a freight train kind of going downhill. So I'm glad you stepped away from the guy. I mean, he got 9 points for what it's worth, but hopefully Ford can put some more on the board for you this morning here. So, Joe, I had another one come in via DM here. So I've got either Deontay Johnson or Amari Cooper. Any thoughts on that one?
I don't know what to do with Amari Cooper given that quarterback situation, because he's had some good games with the backups and then he's had some bad games with the backups. And then Deontay Johnson comes back from injury, has 2 or 3 pretty solid games, at least solid for the Pittsburgh offense to start. And now 2 weeks in a row, he's stunk. And now they have a new coordinator. So if anything, I need somebody to make a little heads or tails of this one for me. What do you think on this?
Well, I'll stick with Deontay Johnson just because you're right. Just because from a quarterback standpoint, I can't necessarily trust anybody on the Cleveland offense outside of their running game. Seemingly, even a guy like Njoku, who's supposed to be maybe one of the more consistent tight ends, I don't necessarily see that working all that well in Cleveland. And you brought up injuries, and see, this is why we need Mikey back. I completely skipped over any significant injuries people have to look at for this week, Joe, that you want to check in on.
Yeah, let's take a look at this real quick. So, at quarterbacks are pretty. I think we pretty much know there's no new quarterback news. We know all the backups that are playing. It's a long list. A lot of stories this week out on sports television about breaking records with all the QBs, backup QBs that are starting the NFL right now. Running back, where if anything, we're getting some guys back. Kyron Williams back for the Rams today. He came out of nowhere earlier in the year and then went out for a few games. It does show Rashid White questionable, but he is going to play, it looks like. So we got a pretty quiet, Damian Pierce, he's questionable, but he's expected to be back for Houston. We already talked about that with Singletary. So a pretty quiet day. I guess one thing, Jerick McKinnon is out for Kansas City. I don't think people play him in leagues too much. I do see him pop up in a DFS every once in a while because they do use him in the red zone. So that probably gives some more carries to Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's really it at running back. Real quick at wideout, even wideout, we're relatively healthy. We do know that T. Higgins is out again this week. That did make us excited for Tyler Boyd prior to the Joe Burrow injury. I don't think it does anymore. Hollywood Brown is questionable, but he is expected to play for Arizona today. Noah Brown is out again for Houston. So look for both Collins and Dell to probably have double-digit targets. One of the newer injuries this week that popped up, Michael Thomas with a knee injury has been placed on IR by the Saints. He's out for the next 4 weeks, which is why we like Shashid so much from a DFS perspective. And I guess Darius Slayton is doubtful for the Giants today. Not really relevant, although we did have a good week last week. Yeah, and that's pretty, Dallas Goedert's still out for Philadelphia. We kind of knew that. That's pretty it. For week 12, it's a very quiet injury front right now. I guess all the quarterbacks have already gotten hurt, but running back and wideouts are relatively healthy.
And so, and you mentioned Slayton, and I know this is the Blitz, and we answer some start sit questions, but I'm going to throw this at you just because we do a DFS show too. Because Slayton is out, I know that Wan'Dale Robinson is a cheap play on DFS. Is he someone worth sliding in the lineup? You think? I was looking at him at some other lineups, so I just want to get your thoughts on that.
He probably is, because if you remember on DraftKings too, it's not even a half a point PPR. DraftKings is actually a full point PPR. So I could definitely see Wan'Dale getting, but if it's 6 for 60, that's 12 points on DraftKings, and he gets a couple of rushes each week. So, yeah, I don't think, I think it's realistic to think that he could net you double-digit DFS points for the week. Probably wouldn't want to play him in a league, but yeah, I would take the DFS shot there.
Right on.
I got a couple real quick that have just come in. One's a defensive one. We don't get many, so it's fun. Would you take the Bengals defense against the Steelers today, or that Chiefs defense against the Raiders?
That is a tough one. It's funny. Cincinnati's defense had played well for a handful of weeks in a row, and then they kind of fell off. And I think just given the offensive situation with Burrow out, that probably leaves their defense on the field a little bit more. And not that Pittsburgh has a potent offense, but I just don't think you can get away. The Chiefs' defense has turned into just a tier 1 type defense, and the Raiders aren't exactly explosive on offense. I just think that from a point standpoint, you might not see Pittsburgh score as many points as the Raiders, but I can see the Chiefs getting more turnovers and a few more sacks to get you those points that you maybe need that you wouldn't get from Cincinnati in that standpoint. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think you said it exactly right. I think the Raiders will probably score more points than Pittsburgh, but I absolutely agree between the turnovers, a pick six or whatnot, that Chiefs defense got the opportunity for more points. I'll tell you one other thing too. If you put this Chiefs defense on one of those Chiefs teams with Tyreek Hill still on it, and you probably have like an all-time great team. That team probably goes 16-1 and they win the Super Bowl pretty easily with this defense and the Chiefs offense from a couple of years ago. They just never had the defense when they had the offense.
Right. And we were talking before the show. I think you had another or a couple more of these.
Yeah, I do. We got I just mentioned Rachaad White being questionable. He is going to play. So would you go White or Ramondre Stevenson? And I think I know actually what this is it's really there's 4 options. Play, you got to sit 2, play 2. White, Stevenson, Saquon Barkley, and Kyren Williams.
So I would say I am playing White and Barkley and sitting Stevenson and Williams. Kyren Williams coming off of injury. I just can't. Not to mention too, you got Freeman, you got Henderson. That's way too crowded of a backfield. We discussed how atrocious the Patriots offense is. Stevenson's talented, don't get me wrong, but Zeke Elliott had I believe 13 carries last week, so he seems to be getting more involved in the run game. So again, we talked again last night. Don't jump to conclusions or base your starts off of one previous week alone, which is why I might hesitate a little bit on Barkley. He had an explosive week last week and kind of it's been choppy leading up to that. But I'm still going with him, and White is the guy in Tampa Bay. They're at Indy. I can see him getting some decent yardage. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, from a guy that's owned Steven, I just feel like, and there's a couple of guys every year. For me this year, Ramondre Stevenson and Amari Cooper's done it before, have just been so hard to figure out what to do with from a league-wise each week. Stevenson's explosive. He's the only explosive guy on that offense. But he's had a lot of bad weeks because their offense stinks. But then he's had a couple of good ones, and he's had a couple of big runs that he's broken or a couple of big passes that he's taken for a big play. So it's a little scary to sit Stevenson. I agree with everything you said on Williams. I wouldn't play Williams in this scenario. I'm a little scared to sit Stevenson, but I'm not. I'd be more scared to sit Barkley or even White with the way that White's become so relevant in their passing game. So I agree with you. I'm going to stick with Barkley and White. I got one more. This was a good one, I thought. Jalen, it's Jalen, right? Jalen Warren,
Yeah.
or James Conner.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. That is a good one. Oh man. All right. Let me give you that. What are your initial thoughts? I got to think about that one for a second.
And you know, it's funny. Like, I never liked James Conner in Pittsburgh, but I just really like the way they use him in Arizona when he's on the field there. He's such a high percentage for a touchdown there. But that being said, I don't think, and I love that he's the starter clearly where Warren's in a timeshare, but it's hard to, like, Warren's hot. Like, he's on like a 12-game hit streak and he's hitting, 450 with 8 homers in that stretch. So it's like, can you really sit him during that? I'm not sure I can. I think I got to go Warren.
Yeah, gosh. I would say I'm leaning Connor a little bit only because they are home and he is the guy. You still have Najee Harris, even though Warren now seems to be outpacing Harris as the number one guy there. So because of that and being on the road in Cincinnati, part of me leans Connor because he has been so great in the red zone. So I can see him getting it. Warren, we've seen break some touchdowns. I mean, I think he had a 60 or 70 yarder last week or the week before, I'm forgetting.
Yep.
But whereas, Connor isn't necessarily as explosive, but he'll get the ball every single time inside the 5. Yeah. So I think just because of that, I'm leaning Connor more than Warren, even though Warren, I tell you, is a great play. We thought, I love the guy from a DFS standpoint today, and he's certainly a good play. If you could start both, I'd start both. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's a tough decision to have to make every week because there's probably some weeks where you're going to get it wrong. But with those two guys, I guess you figure they should both be pretty good each week. So maybe it's not. But I think, that's a tough one. I'll be really curious in general with Pittsburgh this week. Again, new coordinator. I mean, it's not like Kenny Pickett's capable of being Patrick Mahomes. I'm not expecting that. But Johnson had come back, and their offense started to click a little bit. They keep on staying on the appropriate side of 500 from a winning perspective, which I'm not exactly sure how, but the Mike Tomlin effect stays relevant there. I'm really curious to see if the new coordinator makes any difference for their offense or not.
Yeah,
I really don't. I don't know. I mean, that game, Cincinnati too, is such a tough. Some of these teams, 12 weeks in, you still have no freaking idea what's going on with them, whether it's because of injuries or whatever it is.
Right. So I got to laugh a little bit at this one. I had one come in from. Well, I won't name him because I think it's kind of a funny and ridiculous question. But the question was Josh Allen or Josh Dobbs. To me, how do you not start Allen? Dobbs had a couple great weeks. He was kind of the hot play certainly, but fell off a little bit last week. And they're playing the Bears. I know it's a favorable matchup, but you can't sit Allen, can you?
No, I think this is like we talk about, differentiating DFS and leagues, and I think this is a great example of that. If you want to tell me that you're going to want to save the $2,000 on FanDuel or DraftKings and go with Dobbs because Dobbs has a great chance of getting you 20 plus anyway, then I'm all for that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And given the Philly matchup, which I know it's not a good passing defense, but overall they're good, I would be very comfortable with that. I almost feel like that's a smart move. But yes, in a league, I'm not. You can't sit Josh Allen. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Dobbs was 20 for 32 with 221 and a touchdown last week in the air. I do believe, he went 8 for 20. See, the thing with Dobbs is Dobbs has got a rushing touchdown in 5 straight games.
I mean,
so it goes back to the whole Fields thing. But but Josh Allen could also have a rushing touchdown in the, like he's capable of doing the same. I think you got to go Allen. I mean, the problem is if you sit Allen, Dobbs isn't throwing for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. He could have a crazy game, but it ain't going to be that. Allen could throw for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Although, so as I'm talking, I'm thinking, is Justin Jefferson back this week? Not this week.
No.
Okay. Because that might
have
thrown a wrench in the works if that was the case, where it might give it a little bit more thought. So
that's really interesting. Where do you put Dobbs on your quarterback depth chart in general, fantasy-wise, once Jefferson comes back? That's tricky.
Certainly the stock goes up. I mean, Jefferson is a guy who consistently is a 150-yard guy per game. So let's see. We got another question checking in from Jesse. 1 point PPR flex position. Hawkinson. Wait, isn't he out, or is he back? I'm forgetting.
He played last week.
He did. Okay. So it wasn't as serious as I thought. Or Jaylen Warren. So for me on this one, I just think it's maybe not necessarily a no-brainer, but I would go with Warren just because he still gets some work in the passing game. So if you're talking about a PPR, Hawkinson has been a main target. Don't get me wrong, and he's putting up some points. But Jaylen Warren is in the rush game and the pass game, so I think you kind of double dip on that. I don't think you can get away from Warren, especially what we just said about him being now the number one over Najee Harris. What do you think?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I just opened up kind of like Bleacher Report just because I wanted to see a couple things, and the first story for football was Ian Rappaport reporting that the Steelers will get the ball in the hands of Jaylen Warren and George Pickens more often starting this week with the coordinator change. So, I mean, they're talking about getting Warren even more touches, which he absolutely deserves. And I think you said it right. I mean, Warren's on the field in passing situations because he's good out of the backfield from a reception perspective too. So I think that plus his obvious rushing, Hawkinson's great. He's certainly the focal point of the offense there with no Jefferson. But to me, you got to go Warren there.
And we got Mikey checking in. This is an interesting one. Murray or Hurts? So in the past, I think I would have said it's a no-brainer to do Hurts, but Kyler Murray has hasn't he rushed for a touchdown in each of the 2 games he's been back?
I think so.
They're at home versus the Rams. I mean, I don't know. I don't think you can sit Hurts, but to me, it's 51-49. You can't go wrong with either, number one. And if we're talking DFS, Mike, I know you weren't on the show last night. I don't know who would have necessarily been the quarterback in your lineup, but Murray's much cheaper on DFS. So if you got that kind of option and you can, take Murray, who's seemingly getting similar points, or to me might get similar or possibly more, but I'm still wrong with Hurts. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, I would apply the same thing we just said about the last one. I think on DFS, you save yourself your 1,500 and you get Kyler Murray, and it's probably not that huge of a gap when it's all said and done. And you're right, Murray's rushed for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns since he's been back. But I think you got to play Hurts from a league perspective. I mean, just from the perspective of Arizona's got James Conner. They're playing the Rams. The Rams have been horrible. Conner could run it all over them. Hurts is playing Buffalo. Got to assume Buffalo's going to score. Buffalo's defense hasn't been great. Hurts should be able to do what he wants. And, as much as we like the Kyler Murray rushing touchdowns, I mean, we're talking about the tushy push there in Philly. So, Hurts is going to get his too from a rushing perspective. They
have made a science out of that, so much so that I think they're going to change or to not allow that next season. That's the talk I keep hearing. I don't know if you heard anything about that, but it bothers me that because one team is super successful at it, it's something that they want to just ditch for the next season. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was heard Jason Kelsey talk about it the other day, and it was all they talk about, like, you just got to get. To me, I wonder what I'm surprised there's not more injuries on that play, because like Kelsey's hiking the ball and those offensive linemen just like dive down, and I don't understand how there's not more injuries on every NFL play. I mean, I stub a toe and I ice it and sit down for 4 hours. So these guys, it's just unbelievable.
Well, and the thing is, Jalen Hurts, and we saw the video, he squats 600 pounds. So this dude's got freaking tree trunks going in there. That play is virtually unstoppable. I think it might have been stopped once, and I'd be curious to look back. 99 out of 100, it's successful. I'm wondering who the one team, I believe there was one that actually stopped it. I'm curious as to who that was and who was on that front.
They stopped them a couple weeks ago. It might have been the Jets. But I'm not sure. But one thing real quick about Jalen Hurts, that guy's mentality is absolutely phenomenal. And it has been since he got into the league. And this is a guy that got benched at Alabama, I believe, during the national championship.
At halftime.
Something insane like that, right? Goes to Philly, doesn't have the job at first. And even when they weren't thrilled with the pick, I don't think at the time there. And what he has done is just insane. And I just feel like you get a raw deal there, and maybe it's a race thing. I don't know. But you got the Eli Mannings and the Peyton Mannings and the Andrew Lucks. Anytime you got the high character white quarterback coming out, Mac Jones, who doesn't even have the freaking physical talent. But the guy goes in the first round because everybody was talking about how smart he was and how his personality is so phenomenal. And then you got a guy like Jalen Hurts who could shit more physical talent than Mac Jones has, but nobody talked about that. There was no X factor with Hurts' mentality or anything. And that guy, as Pat McAfee would say, he's got the dog mentality, and Philly is reaping the benefits of that.
Yeah, leadership, it didn't get better. I'll tell you, that was, if you want to talk about leadership, that was one of the best examples of leadership, is being benched at halftime in a national championship and just going ahead and taking it and saying, you know what, Tua gives us a better shot literally to win this game, and then transfers to Oklahoma.
Right.
This guy is the definition of leadership. So I agree with you on there. I tell you, Philly hit a home run with this dude. He's going to be great years to come. So looks like, unless you got something else, Joe, looks like we're a little bit caught up here. Anything checking in? I didn't have anything else via DM or text, but
no, I don't have anything. But I would ask this question because it's an interesting slate of games today. What is we talked about that Houston-Jacksonville game and that potentially being the highest scoring game of the week. But I'll ask you this. Take away that Bills-Eagles game, because I think everybody would clearly say that's the top game and the most intriguing game of the week. Outside of that one, which game are you looking forward to the most this week?
You know what I'm interested in seeing, this sounds boring, but it's Cleveland and Denver, because Cleveland's defense is so elite, and Denver is on such a tear over the last 4 games with who they beat, including Kansas City, that and their defense is ever improving. And that's going to be a very interesting game to watch. I think that's on the 4:00 slate. So I'm looking at that one as a old school defensive struggle in Denver. I don't know what the weather's going to look like, but that, to me, that should be kind of fun.
Yeah, I got to give Cleveland a lot of credit, and obviously Denver. I mean, getting 70 hung on you and being 0-3. There's not one person who didn't have that team in the freaking morgue after week 3. And it's phenomenal, the comeback they've made. I like that game. And then there's something, I don't know what it is, but that Ravens-Charger game, I mean, it feels like it doesn't matter who the Chargers play. It ends up being a crazy close game. That, and then if you take the narrative this week that Staley's on the hot seat, he was a real douche at his post-game press conference last week when somebody asked him about going for it on 4th down. So I feel like he's kind of coaching for his life. The Chargers are 4-6, so realistically they need to win this week to still stay in the AFC playoff hunt. They've got the talent to do so offensively anyway. And as amazing as the Ravens have been, they did lose to the Colts this year. They did lose to the Steelers, so they're not above playing that clunker, and they had to go out to the West Coast for a night game. So I'm really intrigued by that Charger-Raven game tonight, Sunday night. The Sunday night games, it's been a good job of getting some good matchups, it feels like, on these Sunday night games this year so far.
Yeah, no doubt. Should be a good slate. Like I said, a decent amount of division rivalries, a lot of close spreads, so should make for some good football. We appreciate everybody checking in as usual. We'll be back Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern for our DFS Chalk Talk show. And we'll be back next week with the Blitz. We'll have Mikey back on board, and production will go a hell of a lot smoother than what I do because that just ain't my forte, and Joey knows it.
Well done today, though. You did all right, kid.
In any case, we appreciate that. Until next time, everybody, we got you covered.